Today we're talking about preparedness because we have political elections coming. We have a lot of different stuff going on in the world, geopolitical concerns, and I don't necessarily worry too much about things, but I also think that it's important to be prepared. And to some degree, as a hobbyist, I take interest in politics. I take interest in the prepper community and all of the people who always are kind of in that mindset that the world as we know it is going to come to an end and something is going to happen and you need to be preparing for that. I think there's a degree of truth in that, even if it's maybe just that a broken clock is right twice a day. People who are always in the mindset that they have to be preparing for something and there's going to be some sort of a black swan event that comes and causes trouble in society or in the economy. Well, eventually, from time to time, those people are right. And there's a Bible story where there's these virgins sitting outside waiting to get into the wedding ceremony, and some of them have extra oil for their oil lamps and some of them don't. And the ones that don't, they run out and their lamps burn out. They're in the dark. So they go to the store to get more oil. And then while they're gone to the store to get more oil, that's when the doors open and the party begins. And the ones who'd been prepared, that were still sitting there by the door waiting to get in, they were able to go in and have a good time. But the ones who had gone to the store because they weren't prepared, well, they didn't get to enter in. And it's kind of the same basic thing. It doesn't matter if something bad happening is not an extreme likelihood. It's still important to be prepared and to be able to navigate various things which may happen to you in life. So that brings me to the question of what exactly constitutes preparedness? How do you know if you're prepared enough? And one thing that stands out a lot to me in a lot of enthusiast communities is that people get really obsessed with stuff. It's this way in gaming, it's this way in politics, it's this way with preppers, it's this way with people who are very interested in their careers or any number of other pursuits. Whenever people become extremely interested in something, they start to have this attitude that you have to do really extreme things in order to be competitive or in order to be part of the club and essentially be doing enough to protect your interests or to do what you need to be doing to be prepared. So it's like, let's just say that we're talking about people that are in the community of car enthusiasts. Well, then they have this idea of what a good vehicle looks like. Now, I could probably go out there and buy a cheap vehicle for a couple $1,000 and I could make it work and it'd be just fine. But to a person who spends many thousands of dollars on cars all the time, they're not going to look at it in the same way. They're going to say, well, here's all the things that you need to be checking and looking at. And I'm going to just say, well, make sure that the tires are good and do your oil changes and, basic maintenance. And then that's probably going to be it. So the person who's going to be an enthusiast is they have a very high expectation. And a normal person is going to be a lot more grounded and just kind of, try to get into the ballpark, but don't worry too much about being extremely granular. So I think about stuff like, I see people getting emergency food supplies. It's like this MRE, freeze-dried food stuff to survive the zombie apocalypse, stuff like that. And I think, that's really kind of silly. Or people who say, well, let's build a underground bunker somewhere to be ready, and just in case the world becomes like something like Fallout 4 becomes a reality or something, right? Like people have all of these fantasies of what they think the worst case scenario could hypothetically look like. And the reality is that's probably not going to be how it plays out. Most likely, if you have a bad situation happen in the economy or in the world, or the geopolitical stuff overflows, or there's an emergency, a disaster, economic instability, what is the likelihood? What is really probably going to affect you? And the likelihood is maybe you can't go to the store for a little while, for a week or two. Maybe there's a run on the stores and the shelves kind of run dry of certain key things that people scramble for, and so you can't get certain stuff that you need. Maybe there's a situation where you aren't able to leave the house for a while because there's some kind of unrest, and maybe it's not safe to be out and about, or maybe there's inclement weather, or maybe there's some sort of a curfew, or there's rationing. Maybe there's some sort of a disaster which cuts out power or makes water unsafe to drink or something like that. So it's good to be able to, have some water on hand, or to be able to get by for a while without electricity. There's all sorts of different things that can happen, but typically those things aren't going to be like Fallout 4. It's going to be a couple of weeks of something crazy going on, or it's going to be having to kind of do some belt tightening and not be able to get things as easily, or not have as much abundance in the local economy as you otherwise would have. So if you're prepared, it's good, because then you're not in the crowd of people worrying about how you're going to be okay, because you have enough to eat and you have your basic hygiene needs met and you aren't desperate. Another major thing that can happen to you is just personal economy fails, right? Like you lose a job, or something unexpected happens and suddenly you have to pay your bills still. It doesn't matter if there's crazy things happening. You still can't just walk away from your obligations. So it's important to lower your cost of living. It's important to have enough money set aside to where you'd be able to pay your bills for a few months. It's important to have enough food in the house and water and things like that. So if something happened, you wouldn't necessarily need to worry a whole lot about making it to the store right away. Those are the kinds of things that make a lot of sense. For a lot of people, it's eliminate the credit card debt. It's basic stuff. Like, you don't have to do any kind of extreme prepping to be a lot more prepared than the average person. Just kind of get above that threshold to where you're living paycheck to paycheck and your cupboards are bare all the time and things like that. Start to get a little bit ahead, and maybe it's not something huge. Maybe it's just make a point that you have enough food in the house so you could stay at home for a week and not worry about it. I know there was a time in my life when I didn't even have that, and it wasn't really because I couldn't have. It's just it was so easy to be commuting back and forth to work all the time and eating fast food and spending a bunch of money on junk food and energy drinks, and I didn't really stock the cupboard, and I didn't try really work on being prepared. And I do try to be reasonably prepared now. Not that I'm really super worried in particular, but I do think that with all the things going on in the world, especially for those of us who live in a time of relative peace, we don't worry a lot day to day. Those of us who are able to go to work, do our day job, and then come home and watch our favorite YouTube videos or play a game of our choice, or whatever it might be. Well, it's good to make hay while the sun shines. It's good to get out there and say, well, I'm going to make sure that I'm reasonably prepared when it's easy to prepare, when I have the opportunity to do so. And if I'm not in a good position, just to kind of make ends meet and have my life balanced out, well, start to make those changes. And I know for me, I hit rock bottom a while ago and just kind of went through this phase where I just was broke, 100% broke, and then worked back up. I worked back up from the bottom. And what I learned looking back is that there's a lot of things that seemed like I had no choice. I didn't have any way to make it work, because when you're spending a lot of money wastefully, everything feels like something you can't part ways with. But the reality is a lot of things can really be solved in a much more simple way than you ever would have imagined. Like, I used to spend, I think, maybe $300 a month for cell phone bills, because I had multiple lines, I had multiple devices, and I had payment plans for my devices and all that kind of stuff. And now, I just have an old phone that I paid, I don't know, $100 for a couple of years ago, and I get basic service on it, which is fine. And I pay, I think, $16 a month for my phone bill. And it really makes no difference. Like the overall experience I have with my phone is not any different than what it used to be. It's just I restructured my life, so I kind of made a point to explore what do I really need to do what I want to do, and realize, I don't need all those extra devices. I don't need the newest cell phone. I don't need necessarily all of the highest end data plans, all those kinds of things. I can just, go with something a lot cheaper, a lot simpler, and be just fine. Same thing with a vehicle. I used to pay a couple $100 for insurance, and I think $500 for a car payment, and when all's said and done, then talking like $700-800 a month just to have a vehicle, not to mention costs of maybe repairs or things like that if it happens. And then now today, what do? Like, I just I have a job that's close to home, and my vehicle is something that I don't worry too much about, because I live in a small town. It's walkable, and it's fully paid off, and don't have to worry about any kind of fancy insurance for it, because it's not an expensive vehicle. So liability is fine. And now, instead of paying like maybe $800 total for car payments and insurance and stuff like that, plus gas, now I don't pay anything for gas some months, and I pay $60 a month for the car insurance, and that's it. So you compare $60 a month to probably around $1,000 a month when you add in the gasoline, then what a huge savings. And that's just a car and a cell phone. And then there's all the other stuff, like you pay for a whole bunch of streaming services and all the things that you think, well, you gotta have Netflix, and you gotta have Hulu, and you gotta have Crunchyroll, and you gotta have Disney Plus, and you got to have Paramount Plus, and you got to have Amazon Prime, and you have to have all these different things. After a while, you know, there's another few $100s that's going out just in terms of monthly subscriptions to a bunch of random things, and those are the elephants in the room, where just learn to cut out some of the things that society will tell you you need these things, you have to have these things, and the reality is you don't. You cut them out and you realize you don't actually really miss them, and when you do without them, then suddenly you realize that you have a lot more autonomy, you have a lot more agency, and when you're light and nimble, you can adapt to things a lot better. It's a lot easier to be in a position where if something happens, you can adapt. You can pick up and go from one place to another more easily. You can cut things out and, you know, do without. And if you're able to survive with very little, then you have an advantage that even the most prepared people in the world probably oftentimes don't have, because you can be very prepared on paper, but you know, it doesn't really matter if you're making $400,000 a year if you have $350,000 a year worth of liabilities that are weighing you down, and you don't really have a lot of agency because your cash flow is still very limited. A simple way to explain this would be to look at little animals like rats or mice or any number of insects or something like that. And the interesting thing is, we would look at the lions and the tigers and the big apex predators, and we'd say, well, those are, you know, what we'd want to strive to be like. We want to be like the lion or the tiger or something. And then the reality is those animals are actually quite often the first ones to become endangered or maybe even extinct, because sure, they're very strong, they're very powerful, they're great predators, they're great hunters, they're strong, but they can only survive in very specific environments that are able to support them. And if they aren't in their ideal ecosystem, then very suddenly they're not able to survive, because they need all of these very specialized things in order to be successful. Whereas if you take a rat, well, a rat is not considered a very sexy animal. It's just a very common animal. They're very much everywhere, and they also are very good at surviving. There's not any place where a rat is not going to be able to find its way and live and probably prolifically reproduce, despite all humans' goals to eliminate the rats and bugs and little creatures like that. They endure and they survive and they thrive all over the world because they don't really need very much to survive. It's a lot easier to feed a rat a few grains of wheat than an elephant a few tons of hay. So maybe another thing that's worth talking about here is fitness and staying in shape. And I'm not saying that you need to be extremely fit, you know, like you don't have to be at the gym bodybuilding all the time. That's not really the point I'm making. I'm just saying don't be completely sedentary and obese and eating a bunch of garbage and living off of junk food and sodas and all the really big elephants in the room that harm people's health. Don't do that, because again, if you're a person who is, you know, able to do better and then you choose not to because it's just not worth it to you and you don't want to push yourself at all, then, you know, what happens when things become challenging and maybe there is something going on in the world and times are hard? Well, if it's a struggle for you to to make it from the couch to the refrigerator, and you can't walk across the parking lot of the grocery store without getting winded, then you're going to have a problem when you have to maybe be a bit self-reliant, or you have to adapt to a changing landscape of circumstances that you didn't anticipate or plan for. So that's also a thing that's it's a very common, simple thing. It's not saying that you have to be able to bench some ridiculous amount of weight, or that you have to be super ripped or anything like that. Just you know, get off the couch and get on a treadmill, or go for a walk, or go for a bike ride or something. And again, it's something simple, but it's very easy to get into the habit of feeling like, I'm just tired, I don't feel it right now, or whatever, and then you sort of drift into a lifestyle of habits that are going to be self-defeating. There's a lot of people who are very successful in adversity, and then there's people who seem to manufacture adversity wherever they go, and they've got major problems going on even when times are good. And don't be one of those people that's you know, manufacturing problems for yourself in good times, because if that's who you are, then you will be in a very bad situation if times ever truly become dire. So make hay while the sun shines. Be prepared, as maybe it's a little bit of extra food for your pantry, maybe it's a little bit of extra fitness or better lifestyle habits, maybe it's cutting out a few unnecessary bills, or finding a way to trim down your budget and your expenses, or pay off some credit cards, or save up a little bit of extra money so that you have eventually a few months at least of savings to cover your bills if you lost a job, or if something went wrong and you weren't able to maybe leave the house or get out or something like that. These are just simple things, and there's a lot of crazy people that are out there trying to say that you have to take it to the extreme, and that's fine for them. But it's kind of like people who say that you can't have a good time as a gamer unless you have a 4090 in your PC and you're running the latest, fastest processor. I mean, sure, it's great if you have those things, but you really can have a pretty good time gaming on a much simpler system. You really don't have to have the absolute best. You don't have to be an extreme enthusiast to be a fan who has a pretty good time and makes the most of what you have. So make the most of what you have. We do live in a time which is uncertain, and despite the fact that many of us do live in a state of peace, we increasingly look at the news and we see things which make it look like the world is not a very balanced place at the moment. So it would stand to reason that preparedness would be wise. And finally, relationships. And I think this is so important, because we can talk about all the things we can do to thrive as individuals. We can talk about going it alone. We can talk about being strong for ourselves. We can talk about not needing people. But really, at the end of the day, it's important for us to understand that part of any strategy for preparedness in life has to be to try to share your life with people who you value, people who you respect, and to do the things that you do for yourself, but also so that you can share a legacy, share security, and do good for others in your life too. Another thing that I think is not talked about enough is the importance of privacy. Be a person that blends in a little bit with your surroundings. I'm not saying that you should hide from people or that you should be extremely secretive. It's just not everyone needs to know what you are doing all the time. Not everyone needs to see your agenda published in public. It's perfectly fine to keep a reasonably low profile and and let people underestimate you instead of overestimating you. Just imagine if people were going to go out and they were going to steal from folks. Well, we would hope not, but let's just say that they did, because it happens. Well, where are the thieves going to go? They're going to go to the house that looks like it's, you know, kind of a well-to-do place. They're going to go to the place that looks like the ideal place to steal from, right? They're not going to go to the random place that looks like there's probably not any good stuff there anyway. So all I'm saying is, if you're a person who likes to draw attention to yourself by showing off all of your goodies, you're also kind of drawing the risk that you will eventually fall prey to being targeted by people who are trying to take advantage of others. So, you know, I think probably a lot of the most wealthy and powerful people around are not exactly inclined to talk about their financial position with others. They aren't really inclined to look for ways to show off. They just mind their business and they do their thing, and they don't necessarily talk a lot about it. They just live their lives, and that's how we should be. Live your life simply, live your life privately, put effort into investing in people who are worthy of trust and investment. Live to protect your interests, but also be aware that being there for others is important too. And in all things, try to live a life which is balanced and peaceful with all things. Till next time, as always, good luck on your adventure, and thanks so much for watching.